Thank you for watching. This is exclusive content from the World Retail Congress 2017 here in Dubai, where I caught up with Paul Charron. Let's hear what Paul has to say. Well, thank you very much indeed for joining us. You've had both a long and continuous career in the consumer packaged goods business and also the retail business. Let's take a little bit down memory lane in a sense. You were a former chairman of Campbell's Soups.
Yeah.
Campbell's always had a real understanding of families and consumers.
Yeah.
Wow, a lot of change in the last maybe 10, 15 years. How would you characterize that change in the consumer, the family?
That's a really good question, and it creates a lot of really good opportunities for consumer insights. The nuclear family of today is really non-nuclear. You know, the family doesn't eat together, the family is going 6 ways from Sunday. But more than that, the family unit is fundamentally different today than it was in the 1950s and the 1970s. If you think about the fact that so many families, certainly in America and I suspect around the world, are one person, a single person household, two older people, baby boomers, 65, empty nesters, gay and lesbian, married living together, married living together, not married living together, multi-generational with in many of the Hispanic families, for example. You have at least 3 generations, the grandparents, the parents, and the children or grandchildren. So what family does Campbell's market soup and Pepperidge Farm and baked snacks and Arnott's biscuits and Plum organic baby food? What family does Campbell's market to? And the answer is all of them. And so how do you segment the market today? I mean, you know, 30 years ago when I was working for P&G, you'd segment the market by well-to-do, middle class, and poor. That was it. Well, now there's about 15 different iterations in each of those areas.
And does that make it easier for marketers or much more complicated? Because in a way, sometimes, you know, if you get to some more micro segments, it makes targeting much easier.
I would say it makes it more challenging because the CEO and the marketer has to allocate resources. He allocates time, he allocates dollars, and he allocates people. Okay, and these insights that we get about these various cohorts are it's kind of like drinking from a fire hose. There's so many insights. You get so much stimulation that you're overstimulated to the point of fibrillating. You know, all the neurons are going this way and that. I would argue it's much more difficult today to pick and choose where you're going to place your bets. You used to be able to buy in the advertising business, you used to be able to buy the soap operas, or you used to be able to buy primetime television. Now you've got countless numbers of cable channels, each addressing specific demographics, specific cohorts, specific attitudes. I mean, a whole lot of segmentation that professional people who work in this as we do don't exactly know where to go. I would argue that the abundance of data really makes life a lot more difficult. When we focus in on one group, we can really attack that group, yes, but there's so many different groups that you could touch on, that you could reach out and touch. That's a problem. It's a real challenge.
Now, many people would have said that the abundance of data, the whole notion of big data, is something that companies should embrace with joy. you have a slightly different perspective, I suppose.
Well, you don't have unlimited resources, so you can't do everything. You've got to place your bets. Increasingly, CEOs and senior level executives in the marketing side of the business need to make those choices. Retailers need to make those choices. Who are we going to really focus on? Is it that young millennial who shops differently? Is it the boomer who's post-spending peak because the kids are gone, but she's the one with all the money? I think that it's very challenging. It's very challenging to make those kinds of decisions. Yes, big data is wonderful. What do you do? What do you do with it? There are a lot of people that have this massive inflow. They're overstimulated. And if you're overstimulated, you don't know which way to turn sometimes. Or you get too much debate in the organization about what we could do. And as a result, you don't ever develop the conviction to do those 3, 4, 5 things that you absolutely positively must do.
So what is the changing role, maybe it's always been that, for the chairman, the CEO, in order to focus the organization now? Because today, you can be a manufacturer, a retailer, an omni-channel retailer, a distributor. There's no end of opportunities at the moment. From your perspective of the chairman, the CEO's seat, how do you focus the organisation to deliver as opposed to spend all their time doing loads of things and never completing anything?
Well, first thing I'd say is those jobs are challenging, but they are clearly the best jobs in the universe. I mean, the best job I ever had was being a chairman and CEO. It was the most fun, the most opportunity to influence people, to influence the world, if you will, in a cosmic way for the better. But the chairman, or particularly the CEO, is the principal allocator of resources. As I said earlier, time, dollars, people. So you pick the projects, you pick the way, how you fund the project, you pick the way you deploy the people, and you better be right, because the market has a very short timeline. Retail has historically been measured on how well you do today versus the same day a year ago. That's a pretty darn short timeline. I read that the CEO of Target is going to take his company kind of offline for 3 or 4 years, going to spend $7 billion, going to refurbish all of his stores. That's a pretty big bet. I would argue today that CEOs have to make big bets, but you can't bet the company, unless, of course, the company is headed down by the bow, in which case, what do you got to lose? But those bets are tough to make, and everybody wants to be brave and bold. And at the conference, we talk about being brave, about putting a stake in the ground, about dealing with realities. We talk about that. Harder. Let's say it's easier said than done.
Now, do those big bets keep you awake at night, or?
Of course they do. There are a lot of things that keep you awake at night. Sometimes the little bets keep you awake at night. Any bet that goes against you is a bet that has the potential to keep you awake. You got to keep your feet moving. You've got to be stimulated. You've got to be calm and orderly in your thinking. You can never let your organization get too high when things are good or too low when things are bad. Organizations, in my view, operate best when they're in kind of a mid-range equilibrium state, and the CEO is the individual who drives that equilibrium. Sometimes you got to pick up the pace. We're going to pick up the pace here, but you can't run an organization full out into perpetuity. People get exhausted. But still a fascinating challenge with all the sleepless nights, the satisfaction of getting it right, the satisfaction of working with a team you care about on a project of some substance, not just making money, not just building the stock price, but dealing with people you like and respect, doing something good for the communities in which you live, for the constituencies you serve, for your colleagues and associates. Those are great jobs.
Now, one of the things that the CEO and the chairman particularly has to do is to deal with the city and the street. Have you noticed a change in sentiment of what the big institutions, financial institutions, investors are looking for in terms of top line, bottom line, profitability mix?
That's another good question. My view is that investors are looking for revenue growth. Yeah, they want profit growth. Revenue growth without profit growth is not good. But there's been so much pressure on cost reduction, store closings, headcount reductions, things of that sort, and with companies like 3G, the Brazilian private equity firm that's bought Heinz and merged it with Kraft, bought
with
Anheuser-Busch.
help from Mr. Buffett.
With a little help from Mr. Buffett, who has got a lot of money and takes a preferred return and is a very, very smart and legitimizing guy. I think the jury is out on whether the 3G approach will actually carry the day.
And the whole notion of zero-based budgeting.
The whole notion of zero-based budgeting, it remains to be seen. However, everybody is working on that. Everybody is, at least in the packaged goods business that I'm aware of, at least in America, is working to 3G themselves before they get 3G.
And is that a good thing?
But some of it definitely is, because companies over time, over the last 25 years, have built up bureaucracies. They built up institutional processes. They built up cumbersome strategic planning and operations planning processes to get things done. Sometimes you just have to cut away the dead wood. You've got to say, I'm going to blow that up and I'm going to start over anew. So I think that some of the 3G stuff, looking very objectively at what you're doing, is exactly right. But if all you get is increased profits, $300 million in cost savings over 2 or 3 years, what are you going to do when you run out from under the air cover of that cost reduction? You've got to find ways to grow the top line. So if you were to ask me, as you did, what's the number one thing that investors are looking for? What's the number one thing that CEOs are looking for? Top line, profitable revenue growth. That is the most important thing. I think it's going to drive acquisitions. It's going to drive combinations, and that's what people have to have. And so some of these entrepreneurial things, particularly those things that rely on technology to enable enhanced revenue growth, those are going to be really appealing.
Finally, you're now a director of Escada firmly in the retail business. Is it a great time to be a retailer or a seriously scary time?
It's a scary time. Definitely it's a scary time because of massive input of insights. There's so many companies that are doing poorly. There's so many companies that don't appear to have, retail companies that don't appear to have compelling strategies, that don't appear to have true marketable differentiation, like how is retailer A really different from retailer B or C, D, E. The consumer has an abundance of substitution alternatives, as the marketers say, and they've got the internet on their iPhone or Android device that tells them what the prices are on exactly the same items. I would say it's a scary time, but for the winners, the people who are able to keep their cool, to use the data intelligently, to have full discourse with their colleagues and with their boards and make educated bets, I think there can be real opportunities.
Great. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed for watching. This is just one of the interviews that we conducted at the World Retail Congress 2017 in Dubai, where we broadcast every night with an hours-long program. In order to see any of those programs or to watch any of the other interviews, just go to this website here. My name's David Roth from WPP. Thank you very much indeed for watching.